Hello, welcome to the Motorsport Review. I am your host, Perry Brown, and joining me as always is Ray. Hello, Ray.
Hello, Perry. I hope you're good.
Very
Having
well,
a
thank
fun
you.
day.
Yes, very good, thank you. So let's get straight into it. We are here to talk about the 2024 Formula One season. Specifically today, we are going to look at the race winning teams, the top of the championship. So we're going to look at Red Bull's performance. We're going to look at that fierce fight between McLaren and Ferrari for the constructors, and also Mercedes and where their season really sat. They won races, but were they really in either championship fight? So
Yeah.
I think the first place we have to go to in this discussion is Max Verstappen and his championship win. Congratulations to him on becoming a four-time drivers' championship. No, we're not going to get into that argument right away on this podcast. So he is a four-time champion now. And really, Ray, I want to ask you the question straight off the bat. I'm putting you on the spot. This is me testing you here. No wrong answers. But was this Max Verstappen's best championship to date?
Was this Max Verstappen's best championship to date? I actually think that this was his best championship up to date. Like we said, we're not gonna get into controversy. 2021 had whatever happened. I don't want to talk about it because I'm a Lewis fan. We might go, we might talk about this for 2 years, so might as might as well not. The 2022 season was quite, how do I put it? We had the promise of someone new coming into the championship, and then that burnt out very quickly. And Max Verstappen won, and then there was last season that was absolute dominance. That was like, the funny thing is, that because people see my social media and they knew that I watched, or that I watched Formula One. They used to ask me, did Max Verstappen win again? And I'm like, unfortunately, yeah, he won again. And they ask me, I tell people you should get into Formula One. Formula One is so fun. It's amazing. You love it. And they're like, but isn't Max Verstappen winning? He's winning every race. And I'm like, yeah, he's winning every race, but they're like, why do I want to watch someone who's winning all the time? So 2023 was complete, absolute dominance. And 2024, he got tested and he proved again that he's championship, material, he's championship worthy. And, I feel like contrary to popular opinion, I don't think this was Max Verstappen's title to lose. I think this was Lando Norris's title to win. And, he wasn't able to, unfortunately, for, a couple of reasons, and Max Verstappen won, and he's been amazing. He's been consistent, even when the car is not, a race winning car, he'll push that car. We've seen so many times in qualifying, Max Verstappen he will fight with the car to the finish. And I think that's what I like about him. He's very consistent. He's very, I say, aggressive in a good way in just this context. He's very aggressive in that he will fight with the car to get 100 optimum performance. And he knows what it feels to be in a championship winning car. So when it's, not optimal, he'll try to gain as much performance as he can get, to be at least as close to the people at the front. And we've seen, over this season, a couple of races that Max Verstappen isn't in the dominant car, but he can mount, a challenge on the people who have, the faster car. So I think Max, this, just comparing him this season, he's been amazing. And anybody who tells you otherwise, might have a problem with him. But just
Not us.
speaking, yeah. And I think the thing is also the people who haven't been Max fans. I feel like this season he's just had a way of like reeling people in. He's shown people, that hey, I'm not this like this person that you people think. I also have a personality. I can be funny. I can do all these things. And I think that he's showing more of his, personal side and his humor side. And I think, most people who are Max fans and are Max fans now have, slowly come, to liking him this season. So I would say that's also a win for him because, most of the time I read something that Max Verstappen says and I'm like, he is hilarious. If he wasn't a driver, he would be a comedian.
Yeah,
He says the funniest things, but yeah, performance wise, he's outdone himself, scoring that many points, over the season where we've seen, other teams winning races, not just one, but multiple races. And, having a competitor as Lando Norris, in a car that can win races as well, and he's completely, unfortunately, destroyed his teammate,
he had.
completely obliterated his teammate. His points are almost 3 times his teammates. He would have been, in the Constructors' Championship, he would have been P5 if it was Max Verstappen racing, just him, So yeah, he's been amazing. And Max Verstappen comes, I like his attitude. He comes into every weekend wanting to win. And if you want to be a championship, you want to win a championships, that's multiple championships, sorry. That's the mentality you need to have. You should be on it every single race. And if you can't win, you should be close to the people who are winning. So yeah, I think we, and if he doesn't retire soon, because he's been talking about it, if he doesn't retire soon and he has, a car that can win a championship, I think he will win more championships, if he has the ability to. And I think going into 2025, he actually has, he starts the season as a favorite to win the championship. I don't know what McLaren or Ferrari or, potentially Mercedes is going to do, with the cars over the winter and, coming into next season, but they should be very wary of Max Verstappen. Like Toto said, you have a target on your back.
Yeah,
Yeah, I believe that Max Verstappen will come into the season, motivated and really strong, wanting to win a 5th championship, and hopefully he doesn't pull a Rosberg. Don't win again and just dip.
there was a
Yeah.
lot of rumor, wasn't there? Especially, was it Friday in Abu Dhabi when he suddenly announced, "I'm going to be a dad," and everyone went, "Oh, here he is, the guy that has said for years that he doesn't want to carry on racing into Formula One for that many years. He's suddenly going to announce it, isn't he? He's going to do the Rosberg." But no, I think I completely agree everything you said. I love the bit that you said about this wasn't Verstappen's to lose, this was Norris's to win, and I do think that next year is even more on that level. Norris has now finished second in the championship. He's won the second amount of races after Verstappen this year, and I, as a McLaren fan, we'll talk about this in a minute. I think McLaren need to hit the first race like they hit the 5th race in 2024, and how they hit, I think it was the 9th race in 2023. They come up with this baseline, and then they go, here is an upgrade package that suddenly puts it on the same plane. Because by the time that the upgrades arrived in 2024, Max Verstappen had 3 1-2 finishes with Perez finishing second in the bag. He had a good points lead. And then, as you said, everything's correct after that. It was then a very close championship battle, not just between Verstappen and Norris, but you had any one of 4 cars could turn up and be the quickest. And where you said that he turns up every weekend and he's in the fight for a race win, and he has that winning mentality of, okay, practice hasn't gone well, I'm going to show up tomorrow, I'm still going to qualify 5th. And then if I qualify 5th, I'm still going to go and win the race from there. I just have to do it not from pole position. And every time he arrives at the track, it's got to be better than the last time he arrived. Even if he sticks it on pole, that wasn't good enough. I was only on pole by 2 tenths. I'm going to go out there today and I'm going to win the race by 30 seconds. He's just always got to better himself.
I remember I call them the dark times, 30 seconds, 21 seconds, 18 seconds. And I'm like, oh, Max Verstappen, please. Do you remember, I don't know what race it was, but he was ahead by about 36 seconds. And he was telling GP how he wants to pit, maybe take a snack, and I'm
Mm,
like, you're mocking us, Max. It's enough, like go slowly now. You see, that's the thing about Max Verstappen. It doesn't matter that he's, already in a comfortable position to win the race. If he can dunk a whole, you know, a whole 50 seconds or a minute, if he can be ahead of the whole grid by a lap, he's gonna do that. Because you'll find he's ahead by 30 seconds and he's just fastest lap, another fastest lap. Like he's always looking for ways to, go above the bar. When you think this is where Max Verstappen is, he'll come and, and show I can go beyond that. And I think as a racing driver, he's actually one of the best we've seen. He's a generational talent. And the thing is, we might not see another Max Verstappen ever, because he came into the sport when he was really young. He debuted at like 17. So he was like really, really young coming into the sport. And everybody's like, who is this kid? I know he's just Verstappen's son, but it's like, why are we looking at this kid? He skipped Formula 2 and he came into the grid with Toro Rosso and then was promoted to Red Bull. And he's just, been proving this is where I'm supposed to be. Remember, in Mercedes' era of dominance, we would have, Ham, Bottas, Ver. We always had a Verstappen, in the podium. And I think for me, I kind of tuned my mind that Verstappen will be a race champion in 2020, which I think I shouldn't have, like manifested into the universe, because I manifested it at our own detriment. So in 2020, I was like, okay, I remember it was COVID. And I was like, Max Verstappen is actually really, really good. He can win a race if he has the machinery to do it. But most races, Mercedes were way ahead. And I was like, you know what? Maybe when Lewis eventually retires, I'm gonna support this guy. This Max Verstappen dude. At that time he wasn't really vocal. He wasn't really vocal because Red Bull weren't at the top at the time. So I was just quietly like watching his progress. And then 2021, he just showed up and boom. We're like,
quite a lot of times when
yeah, I was like, why did I, manifest this to the universe? I mean, but yeah, if you try to be, objective, thinking about the sport, you're like, we will probably never see another Max Verstappen. Like he already, for me, he's in my list of, greats. I wouldn't say where, but he's on a list. There's a list, and he's somewhere on the list.
he makes
So
the
I
list.
think, yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, I think more what we saw in 2024, why I'd argue this was his best season, was he was probably more willing on the days where he wasn't going to win to go, I just need to collect third place. I just need to collect second place. When as we've reviewed already, we've got 4 cars that can win races in 2024. So he knows there's a potential worst result, because he's always going to finish ahead of Perez, of 7th place. So he's just thinking, if I come 5th, that's 2 places better. And today's not been my day. And again, he turns up in the next race and he goes, this is the time that I win. He had a lead to protect, but he turned so many of those days where he was going to come 6th or 5th into 2nd place, another podium, another trophy to take back to Milton Keynes. And the one that stands out for me is Singapore, where he finished 2nd. And again, remember, they showed up at Singapore. Practice was nowhere for them. And it's not a track like Las Vegas where they turned up and they were nowhere and they went, yeah, we need to take a big cut out of the rear wing, and suddenly they stepped up. Singapore, they've got as much downforce as they can put on the car. So they had to change things fundamentally in the setup. Yes, he needed a few other things to go his way, but he just never stopped. And yes, as well, Lando Norris went and won the race by 20 seconds, and people said it's a dominant performance. But you have to look at the gap behind Verstappen. Red Bull and Max Verstappen executed the perfect weekend that they could extract. if that makes sense. So I thought that was one of the standouts. And quite often, if you look at football as well, sometimes they say you don't look at the wins of the team that come first. You look at the days where they converted a loss into a draw, or they turned a draw into a last-minute win. It's on the days where you're not at your best performance that you really shine in a championship fight. So that's what we saw. And as we're sort of hinting, Perez didn't give us anywhere close to that. So there is a big question mark that I'm sure we'll discuss later as to what will happen to that second seat. But should we
unfortunately, he gave us nothing. Like, I don't know, the picture of, the guys, the drivers, I don't know what they were talking about, that it's all the drivers, and then Sergio Perez is in the group, and everybody won a race except Sergio Perez.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of questions behind why is Sergio Perez not performing. We don't expect him, to perform at the same level as Max Verstappen, but at least close enough to Max Verstappen. If Max is coming in first in the race, we should see Perez on the podium, or at least if it's it's a bad race for him, maybe fourth, fifth. And if we see Max Verstappen, maybe fifth, we should be seeing Perez in sixth or seventh. But we've been seeing, I would use subpar performances from him. And for me, as a fan, I don't like the idea of a team just having one person who's constantly, bringing in all the points, constantly is the one who's, performing. You kind of don't want that, racing dynamic in your team or in the sport as general, because you want to see, both teammates, kind of pushing each other. I don't mean like Lewis and Nico Rosberg, level, but at least, like we've seen with, Lando and Oscar Piastri, the dynamic works. They're really close together. You see when Lando Norris is, first in qualifying, so he's on pole. You'll see Oscar Piastri in second or third. So they finish quite, I wouldn't say they're on the same level, but at least racing wise, you see there's not such a huge difference in, the points in general. And that's actually just what won McLaren the championship. You kind of need both drivers to be in it, giving the absolute best every single race. And Perez just hasn't done that at all. And there's a lot of questions, number one, he said, the car, there's a lot of assumptions, and people say maybe the car isn't suited to Perez, it's more suited to Max Verstappen. We heard Perez, saying that, he likes the car with more understeer. This car isn't really giving him that. But, the performance difference, the gap, it's too big, to just go unnoticed. And I think everybody from the fans to, I know Red Bull themselves, there's a lot of questions to be asked, with also Christian Horner coming and saying that probably they might replace him with, Yuki or Lawson. So yeah, I particularly didn't like the fact that he only got 152 points. Max Verstappen had 437. That's such a huge gap. His gap is bigger than the gap of all teammates, the teammate gap for all other teams combined. His gap between him and Max Verstappen is bigger. So there's a lot of, what's not happening, and unfortunately, he's the only person who can tell us for sure.
Yes. And if you listen to him, he's saying, well, I've got a Red Bull contract in my pocket. I will be a Red Bull driver next year. And they had that crunch talk apparently at Red Bull on Monday. Not heard any news yet, but I think we're all expecting it, because whether you believe these theories that are out there that say Red Bull tanked the constructors because third place gives them 10% more aero time to work on the 2026 car, and so they're happy for Verstappen to win the championship on his own and to come third and give the constructors to someone else. I choose not to believe that, because as you say, there's such a difference. There's such a huge gap between them. And yes, we did see that to an extent last season, but he still got 2 wins. So that's still 2 days where he performed better than Max for various reasons. He did not once, I'd say, perform better. On paper, he got one more race finish better than Max, which I think was possibly the DNF in Australia for Max.
Yeah, and he actually came in and said, I remember in a point last season, and he was, his goal is to actively challenge for championships. Unfortunately, that didn't go his way. But Perez, remember, you said your goal is to challenge for championships, but you're not at all, because him. Basically, I know the Red Bull hasn't been the number one car over the season, but Max Verstappen has won races with it. Max Verstappen has been on, multiple podiums with the Red Bull. So when you see that, huge gap where you in the Constructors' Championship, he comes after all the other drivers in the top 4 teams. There's a lot of questions. He should be maybe P4 if, he's had a completely bad season. We should see him, maybe P4 or like P5. But he's P8. That's a bit concerning.
I mean,
So
P8 is a good day for him some days. Quite often we're watching qualifying where the gap is not big. He could be out. He'll go out in Q1.
He's out in Q1.
That's mad.
Actually, you can find people actually betting on it. They're like, will Sergio Perez get knocked out in Q1? Oh, yeah. He gets knocked out in Q1. If he makes it to Q2, it's a whole thing. And I think it's quite, that's the thing that gets people talking. And they say that it's quite unfair that, unfortunately, I don't want to use this term, but it's the only time I can use that there are more deserving people to be in his position, driving alongside Max Verstappen.
Absolutely.
And I think, I am, personally, I'm ready for that conversation. I think, there are other people who should have a shot in the Red Bull seat. And like it's the Red Bull team philosophy and how they've worked, previous seasons. And we've seen Alex Albon, getting cut. We've seen Pierre Gasly getting cut. And like where's the same energy that you were giving this other drivers like Pierre Gasly in the middle of the season? He was told bye-bye. We don't need your services anymore, because you're not giving us what we want. And I think they were performing at a better level to Sergio Perez. So there's kind of a mismatch, but there's all this talk about Sergio Perez bringing in the money. I don't really know. I don't really run the accounts, but yeah, I think now it's time for a change.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of good faith, I think, paid from Perez, because I think he was quite pivotal in 2021 to that success, because if Hamilton was having a bad day, Perez was backing Verstappen up closer than Bottas was to Hamilton. And ultimately, I think that's why Mercedes went with their change, and Red Bull have, even years later, stuck with Perez. Plus the sponsorship money probably goes a long way. But he was doing the job.
I mean,
other drivers this year bringing in sponsorship money have lost their seats. And they're not driving at top teams either. They're driving at teams that are struggling for finances, and that's a much bigger call for those teams that are struggling financially or on the lower end financially to go, yes, this driver's bringing in a lot. It's probably going to cost us a lot of money to replace them, but we need to at this point. And Red Bull should be thinking the same. So we'll hold on to that. We'll probably come back to that when we get the news, because we're all expecting it at some point before the first race.
I think it was the talk of in Abu Dhabi. We could hear commentators say this will probably be his last race, but also the entry list for next year is out. His name was on it. So, and he was quite sure that he will be driving for Red Bull next season. So, let's wait. They might shock us.
We'll see. We'll see if he gets just one more year or even half a year, and they finally go.
Because now Red Bull is Max Verstappen, Max and Max Verstappen. That's a team. Max and
Yeah.
Max Verstappen, pulling together to get points, and actually Red Bull being, third in the constructors is a huge deal, I would say, given the performance of the other teammates, Max's teammate Sergio. So there's a whole talking point to that. But I think, the two top teams have been, exceptional, McLaren and Ferrari, especially McLaren, Actually, I think it didn't hit me that McLaren might win the championship till like later in the season. And I was like, wait, McLaren actually will win this, because it was Red Bull that was at the top. And then McLaren just came slowly, chipping away every single race, from Miami when Lando Norris won his first race. They've been chipping away points from Red Bull, and then, the tables turned. And then Ferrari eventually, they also did manage to catch up to Red Bull. And Red Bull was thrown to third, and we've seen McLaren and Ferrari fighting that the only difference between them was 14 points, and I think that's it's a marginal gap, and I know Ferrari they must have felt it when McLaren took the trophy.
Yeah, but I don't
And
care about that. As a McLaren fan, come on, let's not feel sorry for Ferrari. Hang on, I
as a
haven't properly
soon-to-be
celebrated.
Ferrari fan, next year is our year.
I'm completely neutral towards McLaren. I'm very neutral towards McLaren. Yes, we won the constructors. Yes, I get to celebrate again. So yes, it hit us quite early on in the season that we could do this, and as you say about them chipping away, it was huge. We were getting even just second and third in races behind Verstappen. We were going, we've gained 20 points on them this weekend. That gap was coming down, and when we finally got back ahead of Red Bull, and we started to lead the constructors, even that was obviously a big moment. If we went on then to finish third or fourth, just to lead the championship would have been huge. But we were talking, everyone who spoke to Lando Norris, Andrea Stella, Piastri, Zach Brown, were all saying we're ahead of Red Bull. Fine. We are watching we are watching Ferrari. They are who are going to challenge us. And back then I was looking at the gap back to them as like 50, 60 points, going, no, we've got that. There is no way we're giving that many points away. Yes, they are going to be stronger than Red Bull because Ferrari have two good drivers. But again, this was at Azerbaijan. Piastri had won the race. Lando Norris had come fifth, I want to say, fourth or fifth. And Ferrari, Leclerc had finished second. Sainz had been out the race, again, thanks to Sergio Perez, who was actually having a half decent race until he got involved in the side pod of Carlos Sainz. But again, you're looking going, Ferrari have only scored with 1 point. Why, whatever means, McLaren have got 2 cars scoring points. We're doing okay. We're gonna have this, but didn't want to jinx anything. But once again, now we've done it, I can celebrate wildly. And I just want to mention one more time, McLaren are the constructors champions.
Hopefully next year it's going to be Ferrari. I will be moving to, or already moved to Ferrari. When they announced the Lewis Hamilton move on 1st February, I was like, that's enough for me. Forza Ferrari. So yeah, Ferrari almost came close to winning the championship, which is actually crazy because it's been so long, since they tasted victory. And I know what, a championship for Ferrari would mean. And I think they would have a holiday in Italy to celebrate the championship. But McLaren have been very, very, very consistent. I would say number one. But also, a championship is won ultimately by the team that makes the least mistakes. And I think McLaren has been the team that's made the least mistakes. I've been following your strategy. I wouldn't give you 100% on the strategy calls, but you've been making good enough strategy calls to win a championship. I mean, there's room for some improvement, but you've been making good enough strategy calls to win the championship. Your pit stops are, exemplary. You're almost, I know that I don't know if you have the record or it's Red Bull for the 1.8.
We've got the world record in 2023. We recorded the single quickest pit stop in 2024. But overall, they have this DHL
Yeah. So
fastest pit stop award. Red Bull took that for having the quickest most often.
so your the pit stops are, I would say, because Red Bull is the standard for pit stops, your pit stops are as good as Red Bull. So you're making sure that, this is the thing I like about the fact that operationally McLaren have Zach Brown, who's the CEO, and they have a team principal, Andrea, and I really like Andrea. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of Andrea. And I think operational wise, McLaren is actually doing so well. They're able to manage, another thing is you have two good drivers. You have Lando Norris, who's been, in McLaren from, 2019, and he's just been constantly, he's tried to challenge for a win in McLaren. Unfortunately, he came second to, Daniel Ricciardo. And, McLaren, probably thought we're never going to have a chance to win the championship again. And boom, you had a bad car, a car that was basically at the bottom. But, you've been able to slowly make sure that the upgrades that you brought are, correlating on track. And we saw, McLaren just switch, very quickly, as opposed to other teams, I mean Mercedes. Other teams they've been able to switch really quickly into this championship winning car. And I think that's that by itself is something that should be applauded. The fact that most teams will take an entire regulations period to understand their car, but McLaren, what, this is not working, what do we do, what do we change? They changed it, it worked. And they were like, we have two strong drivers, Lando bring it home, Oscar bring it home, and they won the championship. I think for Ferrari, they had a chance. Let's not count them out. They actually did have a very healthy, solid chance to win the championship. 14 points is not a lot. 14 points is like, because they've had 3 DNFs, one for Charles and 2 for Sainz. So assuming they didn't have those DNFs, that those points would have been enough to challenge, to maybe even win the Constructors' Championship. But unfortunately, they did have, those DNFs. And for McLaren, you haven't had, a single DNF because, Lando Norris with Max Verstappen, he had done 90% of the race. So that's classified as a race finish. So imagine the fact that Oscar Piastri did 100% of all the laps in 2024. That means that, if we were rating the car, McLaren have been the most consistent, the most, they've just come into the track since the upgrades and they said, we own the championship, we win championships, we are the team that we've always been, in the days of old. And Ferrari, unfortunately for them, they've had these issues, bad strategy calls. They had that period of upgrades that didn't quite work. They made the car slower. And the thing with Formula One is in the simulator, you see this car, this upgrade will give us like 2/10. But when you go on track, this is the real thing. It makes you lose time. And, Ferrari went a bit backwards. And they had to rectify that. So in that period where they went backwards, McLaren didn't wait for Ferrari to catch up. They actually went ahead and, they were winning races, being on the podium. And I think that period is when Ferrari lost the championship. Because I think the pairing between Charles and Sainz was very, very strong. They would bring in, a heap of points every single weekend, challenging the McLarens if they can. But unfortunately, they had a spell of bad luck. I'll just call it bad luck, bad strategy, upgrades that don't work, that made the car slower. And, that's what cost, the 14 points. Actually, I think if I understood, Charles' emotions after Abu Dhabi because it was just 14 points. If it was like 60, you'd be like, it's 60 points, but this is just 14. You, in your mind, you're like, if I didn't, have the DNF in Canada, maybe I would have been on the podium. This would be this many points. So
Mhm.
there's that, that feeling of, disappointment, which is it's normal and it's human to feel. Maybe if we did this, maybe if I personally I did better in this race, maybe the championship will be ours. But all I can say to Ferrari fans out there, next year is our year.
Yeah.
Next year is our year.
I mean, form is really important in Formula One, and I think if you look at the end of the season, that Ferrari were stronger than McLaren. Yes, there were things like in Qatar where Lando getting the 10-second stop penalty when he could have finished second, so the gap might have been bigger. But Ferrari's form from Austin, when they arrived there and they got a 1-2 finish, is that right? I'm trying to remember it. But they had such a strong weekend, and on a sprint weekend as well. To get such a big amount of points at such a vital point of the season, I think it really sparked into life the thought that they can still win it, and they got so close. And honestly, one more race, if there was 25th race this year with just a 14-point gap, I'd be very worried as a McLaren fan that could be turned around very quickly in one weekend, because we've done it. We had to overcome a 10-point gap in Abu Dhabi in 2019, I think it was, to get third in the standings. And as I say, that was when we were fighting for third. We weren't looking at winning races. That was Mercedes' job with Red Bull. We were hoping to get 10 points, which was huge for us at the time. And it was a big ask, and we managed to do it. I think we scored 12, and this one, Carlos Sainz was at the team, and it was like a big occasion. We've overturned a 10-point deficit. And I remember going into that thinking, there's no way we can turn it around. So when you're fighting for wins, as we were, and Ferrari having such a strong weekend from, again, as McLaren fans, you're hearing Leclerc has a 10 place grid drop. Then he qualifies where he does, and he's going to start right at the back, and McLaren have locked out the front row, and you're thinking, it's everything. I don't want to jinx it, but everything's going the right way. And then
just put your legs up and just wait for the magic to happen.
Yes. Yes.
And then what happens. But I think for me, that race was very comical, because I kind of knew in my head, and I told a few people, Max Verstappen is going to do something, just, to make things funnier, just to make things funny. I didn't know what he was going to do. I didn't predict that he was going to, have, his, his thing with Oscar Piastri. But I was like, Max Verstappen might do something. He's going to try to make things a bit interesting. And true to my my manifestation, he did something. But that was, one of, Leclerc's, drives of the season, drives of his entire career, coming from 19th to all the way to third it's huge.
Mega. Absolutely mega. It was
and this is it's not like Brazil, where there was like, interchanging conditions, there were all these variables. This was pretty much a very consistent, kind of race. And we saw Leclerc from the beginning. He was very, very, and I liked it, he was very, very intelligent to see a gap. He went for the gap, and he, from the first lap, I'm just checking the time, the board, and I'm like, wait, Leclerc P12, then P8. What's happening here? And he, they tried. I think the Ferrari duo did try to bring the fight till the end, but unfortunately wasn't enough, And the thing is, coming back from a deficit is not for every single team. Some teams are able to do it, some teams aren't able to do it. And I think now they'll have this period of like restructuring and thinking, what can we do better in the team? Is it our strategy? Is it, basically the car? Where can we make it, faster, stronger? And I think, the thing with this era of regulations is if you improve one thing, there's another thing that suffers. So if you're, if you're really, you have, you're really fast in this, the straights, you might be slow in the corners. And if you're, fast in the corners, you're slow in the straights. And I think there's that, trying to create a car with that balance that does well at every single circuit. If it's not winning every single race, at least, they're doing, the best they can at every single circuit. And I think that was McLaren, and that's why they deserve to win the championship. Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's that consistency across every race. They turned up, they were quick. As I said earlier, I think they need to turn up with that upgraded car from race one. They need to, and if I'm looking at Ferrari as well, I'm looking at the DNFs. I'm looking at those days and I'm thinking that's going to be the big difference. If they can hit 0 DNFs next year, or even just get it down to 1 or 2, that'll be a big difference. And to talk about Lewis Hamilton a little bit here as well. Obviously that driver pairing is huge, Leclerc and Hamilton. Whether one's a number 1, number 2, I know that's being debated online at the moment, but we won't know till next year. But I said to someone last week, and I said, even if he's right, because he came out, was it in Qatar or Abu Dhabi, and said, maybe I'm just not quick anymore. I don't believe that for a second. He's still quick. He still has it. I think mentally probably checked out. But even if he's 2 tenths off Leclerc every weekend next year, when he arrives in Maranello and a 7-time champion walks through the door of that factory, and he walks into the design department or the team working on the engines or the strategy team, or he gets in the simulator, he's going to make improvements throughout. Just full stop. That is going to happen. So I look forward to the challenge in 2025. I think we're hopefully, everything crossed, it's going to be a mega year for that. I will say again, McLaren were 2024 champions because I can again say they're 2024 champions, and we can revel in it because we're still the champions currently. But yes, the target is very much on our back, and I look forward to Ferrari bringing that fight in 2025. But one team that I did think didn't bring a fight is Lewis's current team, Mercedes. Yes, they won races. They won 4 races across 2024. You'd think that's a pretty good turnover, when 7 different drivers won races, 4 different teams, and you've taken away 4 wins from a season. You go, that's pretty good. We're pretty happy with that. But in the standings, it's not quite the same story. And I've included them in tonight's sort of review of the champions and the top teams because they won races, and they were definitely there on a number of occasions, mixing it for the podiums, for the wins, and causing nuisance to the other teams that were in the championship fights. But for themselves, they just didn't really, they just sort of filled the void between them and the team in 5th. So, I mean, you're watching as more of a Hamilton fan than myself. How did you rate their season? Where do you think they fell off the tracks, if it was?
I remember having this discussion a few months back, and I said essentially what's happened to Mercedes is that two teams have outdeveloped them, McLaren and Ferrari, because last year they finished second in the championship. So basically 2 teams have outdeveloped them, and it seems like Mercedes don't really know what's going on with their car. I think they have the problem where, in the simulator, when, they're doing all their tests and whatever, it's, we can make this difference. We can have 3 tenths here, 2 tenths here, a tenth here. But when they bring all those aspects, all those, like upgrades to the car, it doesn't quite reflect on the track. And I think, they said the Mercedes problem was with the floor, with the chassis. And I think they kind of changed that for this year. It didn't bring, the change that they needed to have. They thought that they would be competing at the top, of the teams. They have a problem with tire warm-up. We've seen it a lot in qualifying where, when other teams are going for like 1 lap, so they can start their qualifying. Mercedes is going for 2 laps. They're having a tire where that problem with tire temperature, and also they're having a problem with overheating. We've seen very many times George Russell being told over the radio, do this, your tires are overheating. We've had Lewis being told that by Bono, and it's just that I think their problem is they don't have just one thing that's not working. They have a few elements here and there that are not working. So over the season, we're just seeing Lewis, going to very aggressive setups, trying to see if he can have, the balance of the car, has been a problem. The rear, which weirdly has been the problem. It's been their Achilles heel since 2022. They still can't resolve the rear. Like, they're always fighting with the car. The car doesn't seem balanced. They're always losing the rear, the slow, but weirdly, the W15 seemed to work in places that are cold. We saw in Silverstone where George Russell got pole. Unfortunately, he had his DNF, and Lewis Hamilton was very competitive that weekend. He won the race. We saw also in Las Vegas, which is cold as well, George Russell winning from pole, and Lewis Hamilton, unfortunately, even with his bad qualifying run, he finished second. So they were super fast. So the thing is, you cannot have a car that only works when it's cold.
Yes.
You can't have a car that only works when it's cold, because how many races in the season are we running when it's cold? You need to have, again, like we said, a consistent car. And I think that was their problem, because as a pair, they're very strong together. I think the Russell Hamilton pair was very strong, and I think Russell is a really good driver. If he has a chance to win, he'll absolutely go and send it and try to win the race. But the car has been lacking, and I think Andrew Shovlin and the other members back at the team, at the factory, at Brixworth, they need to sit down and think, okay, they need a complete, again, overhaul of the car, but it's the end of the regulations. Next is the end of this regulations, and we go to 2026 with a new car. So it's, do they just focus on the 2026 car? Because it kind of seems, unfortunately, for a team that's won 8, championships, that they just haven't got this right.
Yeah.
At all. They seem also to have operational inadequacies. We've seen with qualifying, they always, they're seeming to send out, Lewis Hamilton and George Russell at the wrong times. They get into a lot of traffic. And again, I said tire warm-up is an issue. So they cannot, absolutely, push, because they don't have a clear track. So they get all this, factors that hinder them. Also, again, the car is slow. So during, the race, they can't really overtake. So I think it's quite unfortunate, but that's the thing that happens with, periods, when they switch, into new regulations. There's always that team that was at the top that, comes back, and, they're like, we cannot figure this out. And it's unfortunate, because I think they've, from the beginning, with the concept of their car, you remember the W13 was very radical. Remember, they were like, what, no side pods. This is a way, is Mercedes gonna win again? And it was absolutely bad. Remember the bouncing and all of that. And I think Mercedes, just in this regulations, they don't know what they're doing.
It feels like they started on the back foot and they never quite got onto the front foot, and they haven't caught up. And as you say, they don't seem to understand the current regulations as well as the other teams, and it doesn't seem to suit their strengths. And I'd agree. I think that they should really be looking at 2026 and thinking, look, this is our chance. We're not going to suddenly discover 6 temps in the car that we didn't know existed. They'll still push, I'm sure, of course. It'll be a big year with Antonelli stepping up to be George Russell's teammates. But it's been 3 years now of not understanding the car, which just seems completely crazy. I mean, when you think that George Russell's been teammates with Hamilton, it doesn't feel like it's been 3 years. At most, it feels like 2. But again, you've got a team dynamic there where it's always seemed that George Russell wouldn't care. If he finished 19th, he'd be fine with that as long as Hamilton was 20th. He's always sort of going, I need to beat Hamilton, where myself and maybe others thought he'd come into the team and go, I'm going to learn off Hamilton. I know that he's not going to stick around forever. I don't think we expected him to go to Ferrari, but he wasn't going to stick around forever at Mercedes, and that George was going to inherit the team. 2025 is now that year that he steps forward, and whether he's learned from Hamilton or just spent 3 years trying to bite at him whenever he gets the chance to, will obviously be telling when he's got a rookie teammate that's trying to learn off him. So that's going to be really interesting. As you say, across the board, Mercedes need a lot of improvements, a lot of little steps, as you say, in the organization, in how they run a race weekend, in understanding when they're quick. As you say, they turn up in Las Vegas, they get a 1-2, and everyone's saying this is really good, and they went, yeah, it's good, but we don't understand why we were quick.
Well, we are as shocked as you are, guys. We do not understand why are we quick. You shouldn't be asking us. We should be asking you. Why is Mercedes quick? They had no idea why they're quick. And it was we basically just put it that it's cold and that Mercedes likes cold temperatures. But I think next year will be very interesting. With Kimi Antonelli coming into the team and George Russell, and we've had praises over this period of Lewis Hamilton leaving. Basically the team saying that they haven't met anybody who can quite, translate the data and the feel of the car from the track to the engineers. And that's some very big shoes for George Russell to, kind of put on, where you're basically the team leader and you're telling the team what kind of direction they should follow, moving forward. So, and I think that's where Ferrari is going to get, some sort of like a win, because Lewis Hamilton, has all this experience and he can say, this is how the car feels like. This is what the data is saying. This should mean this. What do you guys think? And, the engineers will give him feedback and he will be like, when I go to the car, when I do this, it feels like this. So I think Ferrari will be able to, make a step forward if they, work together when Lewis says, one thing and the engineers try to implement it to go into, a better direction.
I don't know how much of that there's all these stories and a lot of Lewis Hamilton fans out there saying the team aren't listening to him, that they'll find a fault, and actually it's something that Hamilton's been banging on about for races. Whether that's true or false, it's not for us to get into, but for the same reasons that Ferrari are going to benefit from a 7-time champion walking through the door, Mercedes are going to lose that in 2025. So I find it very difficult to think that they're not going to be even more confused in 2025. They haven't got a grasp yet of what their car is doing or gonna do. Then perhaps George Russell, Kimi Antonelli have got a big question mark next year. Can they challenge for either championship between them? The drivers, I'm sure Antonelli's not arriving there going, do you know what, I'll be happy if I just beat Perez in the other Red Bull. But Russell, you know what he's like. He's turned up. He wants to be at that championship fight. He signed that Mercedes deal from Williams thinking, right, now I can go and fight in a championship. Yes, he's got race wins already and he's shown that he is quick, but there's got to be the question mark over some of the days where he makes these mistakes as well. Again, operationally, we talk about Mercedes making mistakes that perhaps Russell does as well. And Antonelli, I mean, as we can say, we both watch Formula 2. We're going to discuss other motorsport series, so it's worth discussing Antonelli's Formula 2 season this year. And I would say it's not been standout.
Yeah.
Not for the right reason.
Yeah, it's not been a stellar season, but also that racing car, the Prema hasn't been, a really good racing, a really good racing car. So it's not been a strong car. And I think, that's what made, Kimi Antonelli not have a standout season. And I think we can only judge him when, properly when he comes, and races alongside Russell. And I think just Mercedes need to go back and just, on the drawing board and say, this is where we're making mistakes. This is where we're, and I think they do that and try to fix that. I have to agree that, Lewis Hamilton hasn't had, stellar qualifying sessions, this year. And I think that, stems from the fact that he hasn't been comfortable with the car. And when you're not comfortable with the car, you cannot extract 100%. You're a bit scared. If I go too fast, I might lose the rear. If I do this might happen. But the difference between Lewis Hamilton and George Russell is, I would say, Lewis Hamilton has been in multiple, championship winning cars. He knows what it feels like to be in a car that's really fast. Remember the W11? And he knows, the disparity between that car and, the W15. And I think, that kind of feeling that maybe if I do this, then this car might react like this. And we've been seeing him, unlike Russell, who's, very confident and very comfortable in the setup that the team gives him. We've seen Lewis doing very aggressive setups that, mess him up. Maybe he does this setup and, he goes to the track and he's out in Q1 because his setup didn't work. But you see, in race space that he still is fast. He still has it. So I think that, that's a problem. Lewis Hamilton views the glass as, half empty and Russell's is half full.
Very true. I'm going to say something controversial here, because you're a Hamilton fan, so I risk you not ever talking to me ever again, and this being a 2-episode long podcast. But I don't think Lewis Hamilton's strength is his qualifying. I think if you had to pick the one weakness you'd pick up in Lewis Hamilton, it's his qualifying. Now, I know, again, you're going to go, but he's got more pole positions than anyone else ever in the sport. But I think as a McLaren fan, have I mentioned that we're the champions yet? As a McLaren fan, obviously, when he was there with us as well, you look at his head-to-head against every teammate, including Valtteri Bottas at Mercedes when the car was at its most dominant, against Rosberg. It's never been perfect. He's never done what Verstappen has done to Perez. He's never had that season where he's completely dominated qualifying. It's always Sunday races where Hamilton shines through the most. And even, again, we took all the qualities of Verstappen. When he turns up, he hasn't got the best car. That's when Hamilton performs best. And he goes, guys, what are we going to do to win this race? We're starting third. We've got 2 McLarens ahead of us. They're looking strong. How are we going to convert this into a race win from this today? That's where I think his real strength is. And I think that's only emphasised by putting George Russell, as he used to be known at Williams, Mr. Saturday alongside him, where you'd say that maybe his qualifying is probably his utmost strength. So I feel like that qualifying head-to-head probably isn't the fairest judgment of them both. And then if Hamilton's starting further back than Russell more often than not, at some point on the race on Sunday, they're going to have to go past one another.
They're going to, that comment, put Russell in first and Lewis in 20th, and they'll finish together.
Yes.
Which more, often than not is what happens. They, end up finishing, 4th and 5th. Doesn't matter where Lewis started, they kind of finish together, or you'll find Lewis Hamilton actually overtaking George Russell. But I think Lewis Hamilton has, been very vocal saying that, my qualifying this year has been terrible. I need to go back, reset, see where I can do better in qualifying. And, his future teammate, Charles, is a very good qualifier. You'd say he's one of the best on the grid when he had, Charles having, I think 26 poles. He will be, a real challenge to Lewis. I know race pace and, race experience. Lewis Hamilton is, way ahead. But in qualifying, I think, he needs to dig deep to see where he can improve. Hopefully that he actually settles into the Ferrari quite quickly, because, it's a different car. He's never been in a car that's not Mercedes powered, and he's jumping into the Ferrari, which is a completely different car, different philosophy. So, if he struggles in the initial stages, it's normal. It's normal to see that. But yeah, I am very eager to watch if, hopefully he doesn't get obliterated. That's not gonna be very good for my image.
I mean, I thought the same in 2013. Obviously, he left McLaren at the height of where they were in 2012. They finished the season as the strongest team, and he walked away and joined Mercedes, who were not very, they'd won races in 2012, but that was a shock. That was a bit of a misconception, and he went there and he said, "Well, judge me, in a few years." And obviously, then 2014 happened, and everyone went, "Oh, okay, he's had a masterstroke here." And as soon as the deal was announced, start of this year, I thought he's done the same thing. He's going to walk into Ferrari next year. Don't judge him on 2025. 2025 is what it is. It's just to get to know
buffer year.
engineers. It's getting to know the team, how they work, and for them to learn him as well, how he gives the feedback and how to take that on board as well. They have to learn to work with Hamilton as much as Hamilton has to learn to work with Ferrari.
Yeah.
So I think 2026 is
he has to learn that. With he'll be having Ricky telling him, Hamilton, plan C, plan B, plan A.
Plan B and C and quite low. It's normally plan J. What? I haven't got. Hang on, let me get the manual out. So yeah, I think that's one of the things you can walk in straight away and improve. Like plan K, plan M. No, come on, right. We're gonna have three main strategies. If we have to go off them, we're plan C +2, not plan M. What does that mean?
Plan E. Yeah. I think it's an exciting time to watch Formula One. It's an exciting time for those who've been watching Formula One and those who are, going to come into the sport, remembering that there are people, probably the first race was Abu Dhabi. So it's an exciting time. I think next season we see Lando Norris starting the season challenging for a championship. And, obviously Max Verstappen, it will be insane to count him out. For Ferrari, I don't really know, because I don't know what car they're going to turn up with. The thing about Ferrari is don't be too optimistic. They will disappoint you. Don't be too optimistic. Those races that you think, oh my God, Ferrari is going to win this, is the races Ferrari doesn't win. But the races you're, thinking on maybe Max Verstappen or like Lando Norris or someone else, is the races that you see the Ferrari winning. So I think the right word for all Ferrari fans and, Lewis Hamilton fans switching, jumping ship is we need to be carefully optimistic. But, McLaren, I think, how they finish the season, they're going to start, strong from the get-go. I don't know if it's going to be the strongest or Red Bull is going to be strong as well. We've seen them, transform a slow car, on Thursday to a quick car on Friday, or a slow car on Friday, free practice 3 to a quick car in qualifying. So you shouldn't count them out. We've had this, conversation where they say, now because Adrian Newey's, moved to Aston Martin, will the Red Bull fall off, or, what's going to happen? Only time will tell.
I have to say, as a McLaren fan, have I mentioned we're champions? But I'm very glad that Adrian Newey is going to be discussed in the next episode when we talk about Aston Martin and their season, because I feel if he went to Ferrari, that would be too much. Hamilton.
He should have come to Ferrari. He should have come to Ferrari. Would be like, I don't know, we'll be like the Real Madrid of Formula One.
Be like the last time.
We have everybody who's great. We have a good team principal. We have, Lewis Hamilton. We have Charles Leclerc, and we have Adrian Newey. We're going back to back to back.
That would be the Schumacher, Brawn, Tots, Barrichello era Ferrari back again. And as someone that lived through that, as you've had to witness with Verstappen and Red Bull. That was one of my early experiences of Formula One. Was, oh, okay, so Schumacher's won the championship with Ferrari in 2000. Oh, okay, he's won it in 2001 and 2 and 3 and 4, and oh my god, can someone else please just give us some
Please,
information?
someone, please do something. I remember it's like last season, listening to the Dutch anthem every single
Yeah.
race until you actually know it. Actually, when I was quiet and doing my things, I can hear the Dutch anthem playing in my head, and I'm like, God, please, someone else win a race, like anybody. It doesn't matter. I don't really care who it is. Just someone please win a race. And I think I really hope next year it's going to be a year, especially when it's we're changing regulations. We see many teams challenging for wins and for championships. I really hope it's going to be, I would say, a 3-4 way battle. McLaren, Verstappen, Ferrari, and Mercedes.
I like how when we say about 14 battle, we don't even say Red Bull anymore. We just know.
It's Verstappen.
But I think again, there's so many unknown factors. There's so many drivers on the swap. There still could be that one extra, and there's so many, just different
Many
elements.
unknowns, yeah.
It's exciting again. Formula One is back.
We hope so. We hope Formula One is back. And I don't know, I'm very open-minded to a different champion next year. I don't know who it's gonna be. I don't have any, particular preference. I'm lying, but I'm open to seeing, a Lando Norris championship. I'm open to seeing, a Charles Leclerc championship, an Oscar Piastri championship, if it's in the works. I think in his second season, he's actually done pretty well. I think people forget that this is Oscar Piastri's second season. Last year, the McLaren wasn't really strong, and this year we've had, a race-winning McLaren, and he's won races as well. And I think people are thinking, who is this guy? And I think, watch out for Oscar Piastri. He's very sarcastic and very, coy, but he's a racer. He's won back-to-back Formula 3, Formula 2 as a rookie. So he's really good. He's really talented. Don't count him out.
As a McLaren fan, as I may have mentioned, because we're champions, he's definitely one of the biggest factors. The zero DNFs helped obviously massively to being consistent and having two cars at the finish. But his improvement, his first year was good, was solid, coming off the back of having Ricciardo in that team and being, as much as we loved Daniel Ricciardo as a personality, having him in the team but not scoring anywhere near enough points, and them saying, do you know what, we've got to call time on this, and getting Oscar Piastri, who was a risk. As you say, it was he hadn't done anything. He obviously won the Formula 2 championship. He wasn't going to be slow, but putting him in an F1 car, some people thrive in Formula 2 and get to Formula 1 and aren't very good. Other drivers aren't very good in Formula 2 and get to Formula 1 and they do really well. So we didn't know where he was going to be, and he did well. He wasn't quite at Norris's level, as you'd expect for a driver in his 5th season, I think that was, compared to even now, Norris in season 6. Piastri in season 2 was that much closer to Norris that, as a McLaren fan, I think I can say Piastri's possibly, I'll whisper this, our better hope for a driver's champion. But we'll see. That's one of the unknowns.
Oh my God, you should take that back. People will fight you. Your fellow McLaren fans will fight you. But I think Oscar Piastri is not someone to be counted out. I think he just needs to, get more confidence, in the car, in confidence in being fast, because he is a fast driver. But I think, his race pace a bit is not as good as it should be, or at Lando Norris's level. So I think when he gets that confidence, because he's arguably one of the best rookies that we've seen on the grid, maybe even since Lewis Hamilton, remember Lewis Hamilton when he came into the season with Alonso, and what happened. And I think Oscar Piastri is really, really good. And if he, if it clicks with him, mind, body, and the car, he'll be a real, unfortunately, you people might have to fight McLaren fans,
What
Oscar
I'd like,
Piastri fans and
I
Lando Norris fans.
I am most critical of those that I'm fans of. Most people hopefully not be listening going, oh, he's the worst McLaren fan out there. But I'm a realist. I don't like the same way that I've spoken against Verstappen before. It's not that you sit there and go, oh, well, he's a complete menace. It's that you go, what needs to happen is there's a learning that needs to happen. A certain thing happens on the track, whether it's an accident, like a car coming together with another car, or just spinning off, or having a bad Saturday, and how they recover from that. You hope there's a learning, and that's what we've seen from Piastri, that he's got to work on his race pace. But I think from Lando's side, he's the most critical of himself, and that he needs to turn around and go, okay, on occasion I came wheel to wheel with Verstappen, it was most of the time, and he pretty much always came off worse. I think that's fair to
Yeah.
say. Whether fairly, unfairly, then I mean that's not here or there to discuss. I don't want to get into it. I don't want to be even more controversial, even more cancelled than I already am for suggesting Piastri could be the better hope. But Norris has got to take the fight to Verstappen just that little bit
Exactly.
more than he did this season. That's the one thing I'd love to see him arrive in 2025 as this new fired up young Lando Norris, determined to win the championship. That he's got that little bit of fire that I think Piastri has already to take that fight, and that's all I'd like to see, really, that little bit of development from
I
that.
think he can. I actually think Lando Norris can. He just needs to, separate, being someone's friend, in real life and on the track. I think the thing about, and Lewis Hamilton knows firsthand, and I remember George Russell speaking about it. I don't want to get into his, his comments, but the thing is, Max Verstappen is very aggressive, and you need to know what to do with his aggressiveness. So if you cannot be as equally as aggressive as him, you need to know, you need to build another skill to be able to beat him on track. And reminds me of Brazil 2021, when Lewis Hamilton knew, if I can't pass you here, because he was taking, we had that moment when he took Lewis Hamilton, out of the track, and whatever happened, it's, if I can't pass you here, I'll pass you just up ahead. I'll make sure I have a better exit, so I can pass you cleanly. So Lando Norris, I think, and also the thing is, Max Verstappen has raced against a multiple world championship, a world champion with Lewis, but Lando Norris hasn't done that yet. But he's had the opportunity to do that this season with Max Verstappen. So, in Abu Dhabi, he said next year is my year.
Yeah.
So I hope that he's actually very serious about that. Like you said, taking the fight to Max. Don't wait for Max to yield, because Max will not yield. He will never yield. For Max Verstappen, unfortunately, if you will not let him through, he will make sure that he takes you out so he can pass himself. And I think it's not very ideal that sometimes that he races dirty, but I think instead of trying to change him, you should adapt to your situation and try to be, the better one in this, ultimately. And also London Norris, like Max Verstappen, remember, Austria, with the entire drama that happened between them. You can be angry. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You can be angry. This person, basically ruined your chances to win a championship because you had to retire later in the race. I mean, it wasn't a DNF, but you had to retire. You didn't score any points, and Max Verstappen went on to score points. And that's the thing: when you fight with Max Verstappen and he takes you out, he'll still score points.
Yeah.
So he needs to balance, being Max's friend and also being Max's competitor.
Completely
Yeah.
agree. And one thing I think that's, I touched on it, that Red Bull started the season so strongly. I think whenever Lando came up against him, he was always at a 60-point deficit. So that could be the big difference. If he's, if you're trying to fight someone with a 60-point deficit, you're thinking, I need to finish. Whereas you can take me out the next 2 races and still arrive 3 races time leading the championship. So that could be another interesting battleground. But I think that wraps up our sort of review of the top 4 teams. So next time we come back, we'll review the midfield battle. There was a midfield battle.
Yeah, I'm excited about that one.
It was a hell of a fight. So I'm looking forward
I'm
to
supporting a new team.
and
next
we'll include Aston Martin in that review as well. The sort of just above the midfield, but not quite as midfield as the midfield. That makes sense in my head. We'll get into it next episode. But Ray, thank you very much for reviewing the champions of 2024 with me. Champions being McLaren and Verstappen as well. Also won a championship, but it's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you. Goodbye.